Clicklearn Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications and Power Platform podcast. I'm Joel Lindstrom, joined by Shawn, Tabor, and George Doubinski. You were on, what, a 5-month vacation or something, George?
Oh, it was only 4 months. Come on.
But where did you go? Your pictures looked like you were on the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Where was that?
It was, the Lost Ark pictures, those were in Morocco. Those were in Morocco. It's one of those countries, when immigration form asks you, have you been to Africa? And you're like, no. So you've been to Morocco. I say, oh, that Africa. It's quite mixed experience. So it's mixed with Spanish and Portuguese, a lot of Spanish and Portuguese influence, and vice versa. So we crossed Gibraltar on the ferry and then went around Spain and Portugal, and you can see Arabic influence, especially in Andalusia and sort of southern parts of the countries. So that's was really nice experience. But the most bizarre one was on the way back. You have to stop. You can't fly from Europe in one jump to Australia. So you have to stop somewhere. So we stopped in Qatar and we went to a desert. Like we don't have enough of desert of. So we went in Qatar. That's bizarre experience. The most bizarre part was how they invited one of the architects, I don't remember the name, and asked to build something like in the desert. So the guy put like huge sheets of metal right in the middle of the desert, and they lined up like east to west and north to south, something like that. And it's really bizarre. So anyway, we've been traveling around kind of exotic countries and a bit of Europe in Spain and Portugal. But that's about it. And I haven't done a bit of work. I've taken my laptop. I opened it like twice. So I really planning the next trip if we go something like that. I'm wondering is it possible to provide a decent support to your customers using nothing but your phone?
I would say maybe. Screen shares are really hard. I'm speaking from experience here. Screen shares, if you have a good network and you're using something like Teams, if you got a good connection, you can do it, but it's really difficult to see, or if you have to, log into their environment. Those two things are difficult to do via your phone. Not impossible, but very difficult to do.
So you're saying you need like a screen form factor like iPad or Surface?
Yeah, you could do it on iPad or iPad Pro probably.
Well, because on iPhone, the way you have to do it is, I feel it's problematic because it's a whole process. It's not as simple as just sharing your screen. You have to record it to your camera roll, and while you're doing that, it then shares. It's a mess. I did not have a good experience with it myself.
No, I did I connected to remote desktop. I think once from my phone.
Oh, cool.
And though I did solve the problem, but it was kind of mad scrolling experience. My 2 fingers got tired because you kind of use your 2 fingers to scroll, move screen around. It's like imagine a big screen and imagine 3 by 2 inches cardboard that you move around and that's all you see, that piece of screen. So now you can imagine what kind of experience is that. So you just trying to find this bit of screen and you kind of moving around like mad. Then you find it, then you zoom in and then, okay, I see what's going on. Now you have to click in the left down bottom corner. So you scroll like mad again into the left bottom corner, you click it and then you scroll back to see what happened. And it's madness. Yeah. But I hear you. So you need like a form factor.
All right. So George, you're always coining phrases like the use common sense or whatever you said. And one of your phrases is So one of your phrases is license-driven development. Tell us what license-driven development is.
Okay. Let me tell you the kind of what happened around it. We floated the idea and we discussed it. About 3 months ago, And I said, look, it's going to be a great talk for the conference. So submitted, got rejected for one of the conferences. I submitted again for another one. So we'll see what comes out of it. But actually, I submitted and got accepted. I'm doing training on license-driven development at Power App CRM UG Summit in Orlando. Come this fall. So is it October? I think it's October. So
yeah, it's
there
October
is
15th.
Yeah, so I'm doing it's a half a day pre-conference training. And I don't remember the exact name. I think it's from Dynamics to Power Apps with license-driven development. Funny enough, about a month and a half ago, someone sends me a link and say, hey, look, someone stole an idea. And I said, no, we didn't talk wide enough for someone to steal. And lo and behold, there is a guy called Brian Eland, and his blog is brianeland.me. And he's got some good articles. And one of his articles is called License-Driven Development, and he talks about absolutely the same things. So the idea is kind of presents itself to people when they think about it. So I'll tell you in a nutshell what that is about. So, roll back like a couple of years, even 2 years is kind of good enough. Power Platform is nowhere to be seen. It's kind of just the beginning. And you have this Dynamics 365. So what choices do you have? You have choice of sales, you've got choice of customer service, you've got choice of field service, and God forbid, PSA, and what's not, right? So you have those kind of staple applications. And when you get one of those apps, you get everything, right? So remember the days of single sitemap. You get everything. So you can trim the sitemap around using permissions, so make it a bit more palatable. But if for user B you want contacts be ahead of accounts, you'll have a good day, right? So doing that. So anyway, it's becoming kind of a nightmare to manage single application. Then enter the world of Power Apps, and where people say, hey, look, why don't you create an app? Why don't you create an app or two tackling a specific problem? And lo and behold, what's happening is we now have new licensing, right? We're not going to talk in details about new licensing, but basically it's driven kind of to consumption. You pay for consumption and you pay for apps. So in the end of the day, you can have a 1, 2, or unlimited number of apps that you assign to specific users, and they use these functionalities. So the idea is that now you can shape your application by using specific, by kind of targeting specific user needs. Would it be a specific task, specific objective, or what's not? But at the back of your head, you keep in mind that your development effectively, instead of buying, oh, let's go and buy sales for everyone and then put our apps on top of that, you're saying, hold on, does everyone need sales? And now you're shaping up and you're saying, user Joe, you only need, time tracking app. Shawn, you don't need any apps at all. Or maybe you need access to contacts and accounts, so you need address book. So now we have 2 apps that do very specific things, and we kind of took our licensing from $95 a month to $10 a month per user, just because we figured out that, Joe has the need to do task A, and Shawn, all he does is task B. So in the end of the day, that's what it's all about, that you take the license and the cost of your deployment into account before you kind of build the application. So it becomes part of your design process as an architect, as kind of system engineer, you have to be aware of the cost of the deployment when you create the final solution. Does that make sense?
Well, you mentioned, George, you want to present this at a conference. It just so happens you got the Power Platform 24 coming up, and this is the 24-hour conference. So, Australia time. That's going to be used. Probably, I'm not going to be on there because I'm going to be sleeping. So, you need to get in there and submit that for the Power Platform 24. We've got like 22 speakers have already submitted some really good topics, spread pretty evenly between Dynamics and Power Apps and Flow, and even mod Power Apps portal sessions.
Which first of all, when is it?
It's
September 25th, which is probably the 26th your time, because it's probably nighttime your time when it starts, because we start 8:30 a.m. on the 25th Eastern time and go to 8:30 a.m. on the 26th. So again, it's probably going to be like night of the 25th to morning of the 27th for you, or something like that.
No problem. I'll see what I can do. Speaking of which, you said Dynamics and Power Apps, which we both know it's the same thing now. Kind of the same thing, and we've seen a few discussions here and there.
No. I'm intentional with that because, yes, Power Apps, Dynamics, and Power Apps are the same platform. But when I say Dynamics, I'm talking about sessions involving Dynamics 365 functionality.
Ben Vollmer, basically, sessions involving Shawn or Ben Vollmer.
Or customer service, or those types of things.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned.
It's going to be really good. We've got 3 or 4 Microsoft people who have submitted, and a lot of good stuff.
And what's really, really cool is it's independent, so it's MVP driven, right? It's not through any other body. It's just us, which is really
Believe
cool.
Believe me, nobody is making any money on this conference.
No, not at all. This is a labor of love or insanity. One of the two, but definitely one of the two. So
labor of labor. That's what it is. Interesting that you mentioned this Dynamics versus Power Apps, and we've seen a few private and public discussions on the topic. So, what would you say to people who kind of say, "Hey, look, I've been using Dynamics for my customers for 17 years, and my customers have no interest whatsoever in SharePoint." And vice versa, people who say, "Oh, I've been doing Power Apps with Office 365 and SharePoint for years, and my customers have no interest in CDS or Dynamics 365 for that matter."
So,
particularly CDS.
I think, and I see it from people who have a background in D365 who are resistant to Power Apps because you resist what you don't understand. And a lot of times you are against something, I'm not saying you specifically, but you in general, me. We resist the things that we don't really understand because there's a fear factor there. I'm comfortable over here. I'm not comfortable over there. And that's where I've had to push myself out of that comfort zone in the last year and a half. And I'm actually doing real Canvas app projects, have been for a couple months now, and have had Canvas apps go live in production, and a lot of lessons learned from that. But it's interesting because I see a lot of I'm using air quotes here, power addicts, the people who use that term, the people who are coming from the Dynamics world and then jumping into Power Apps and Flow. And you see a lot of excitement, which is awesome. You see a lot of people posting things like late at night or over the weekend, I just built this awesome Power App game or something. And what I've realized is, and this isn't all of them, but I have this theory that the reason they're doing it on nights and weekends is because in their day job at a Dynamics partner, they don't get to play with the cool stuff because they're still using just their partner that they work for is still just focused on Dynamics. Where what I'm finding is the more I do it as part of my day job, the less desire I have to write Power Apps and Flows in the off hours.
Well, and that's from our side. What about the other side where people have started with CDS 1.0 Power Apps, whatever you call, and their main data source, so to speak, would be SharePoint, or even SQL, and they say, oh, we have no desire, or my customers have no desire to go to Common Data Service. Are they kind of shortchanging their
you're trying to pull
customers?
me back into the licensing topic here, George. One, I
No,
think,
no, no.
Well,
Look,
and you
I
also
agree.
you have to also remember that a lot of customers don't understand what CDS actually is and how by leveraging the capabilities within CDS, it gives them a lot more flexibility longer term, not only for integrations but for other app potential app development. So sometimes they've heard one or two things about CDS and maybe it was CDS 1.0 that was a little bit problematic. And it's really our job to make sure that they understand completely what the benefits in the roadmap for that particular customer is. And that generally, from my experience, helps them make a more educated decision. I'm not saying they always say, yeah, let's do CDS, but they have a more informed decision and can understand where it fits in their particular technical landscape, if you will.
And CDS doesn't equal dynamics. That's kind of the important message as well. So
correct.
bottom line is, what I'm telling people is that if you are in one of those camps or historically came from one of those camps, like would it be, let's call it SharePoint kind of camp and, Dynamics camp, if you're one of those camps and you completely oblivious, so cost of licensing aside, right? So I appreciate the difficulty of talking about to a customer about increase. But if you're in one of those camps and you completely ignore and say, my customer has no interest in technology X, I think you shortchanging both your customer and yourself if you're not exploring the other part of town, so to speak. But Joel, tell me, you're now dabbing into Canvas, and I've heard you've been reprimanded for making round orange buttons or something like that.
So it does bring up an interesting factor for people moving from Dynamics into the Canvas world. Is there's this thing called user experience that basically you don't have to think about.
Tell me more. I never heard of these people called users.
No. Yeah, no, but Dynamics basically makes the decisions for you, and it's not always a good decision or a great decision, but it's a not terrible decision too. I mean, they have UI. Now, it's the classic UI, certain pieces were not great user experience, but unified interface is better. But you never think about how big should I make.
Here's the message from Microsoft: move off the classic user interface into unified experience, or it's going to be too late. Okay, continue, John.
Right. So now, and so if there's something I've learned in moving Canvas apps is learn user experience. Read books about it. If you don't have the background like you, George, you've developed, you've built, you've done WordPress and other things like that. I don't think you'd consider yourself a designer per se, but you've built websites before. Where if you haven't, that's a good place to focus because you need to think about that a lot more when you move into Canvas apps. And so what we're doing, just to let you know, is we're looking at using the components so that to take some of that guesswork out of it for people like consultants learning Canvas apps by pre-creating headers and buttons and things like that can be reused as a starting point rather than starting from the blank canvas. One of the things the user experience guy and one of them on our team has recommended is look at your favorite apps, notice the similarities, and you may be copying certain things other people do in your favorite app, but it's sometimes a good advice to get started to at least have some metaphor that looks good.
And you do recall that one of the kind of one of the people we all know mentioned in passing something like, "Oh, our customer created a great Power App." A person who's not a developer, citizen developer. And we said, well, can we see it? Can we see it? And said, yeah, no. And so why not? It solves the business problem. Well, it does, but it looks like dog's breakfast. So,
But
and that was the
that raises
challenge.
another point, though, because you got to think of where you're coming from. And if you're using this to replace a spreadsheet, you don't have to have a pristinely beautiful app. And that's where I find some people go a little bit too far and want to make these beautiful apps that look great. And there's a lot of things you see are, and nothing against pre-sales people, but a lot of things you see posted are from people who are pre-sales, and they're really good at making things look really good. But there's a difference between that and things that are delivered live in production. So I would trade an app that is delivered and actually used by 50 people in an in production scenario day in, day out, than one that looks beautiful that nobody ever uses.
Well,
totally.
and one of the things that Canvas apps gives you the ability to do is you can deliver great functionality with low velocity towards user experience or optimization, and it can be tweaked while the users are using it in production. So you could get a functional app out quickly and then still have the ability to update and maintain that user experience. Whereas with custom dev apps, that's a little more difficult. There's a little more iterations. There's a lot more time that has to be invested to make those tweaks, in my experience. So your point's valid, but at the same time, I typically try to work with with the client's marketing team to try to understand, do they have color palettes that are desired? Do they have certain images that they want for branding, that kind of thing? Outside of that, I don't really try to do too much more with the Canvas app.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that there were a few posts early on about how to do theming in Power Apps. And people used to, like, you drop invisible buttons somewhere and then you tie properties of your other buttons to that button, and it all starts to look the same, and then you change in one place. And there is an item, I think, in ideas that to provide theming. The theming that does exist in Power Apps is insufficient, let's put it this way. So you need kind of configurability. But most importantly, why I like themes, and that comes from WordPress as well, building websites and so on. Why I like themes is that they give consistency. So to me, if you have orange buttons, that's not a big deal, but have them throughout the app. Don't have orange buttons on one screen and then red one on another. And people ask, like mentally at least, inside their head, they're asking, why is this button red? Am I supposed to press it in an emergency situation? How is it different from the orange one before? So don't make, there's a great book about design. I don't remember the author. We can look it up, but it's called Don't Make Me Think.
Oh, I just read that.
Yeah, you did.
It's very good.
Yeah.
So the revised version.
Oh, there is a revised version. What did I mean?
The original was, well, it talks a little bit about mobile. So, but yeah, it's good. I think all the chapters, but that one are the same.
Yeah, but
I would recommend that book a lot. It's the kind of the classic of user experience. So, and that's where I think too, some of the, and there are some really amazing things you can do graphically with the Power App, but sometimes I think that the really, really snazzy demos intimidate people who are not at that level from even trying. They say, there's no way I could build that, so I'm not even going to try. Or I encourage everybody, just build the most pedestrian functional app, even if it's 3 screens with fields that reads and saves data. Get familiar with that. Figure out what the next thing you need to learn, which, then maybe filtering and searching and formulas like that. And then context variables. And before long, you'll be going. One thing I have learned, the whole polymorphic fields thing isn't quite there yet. I guess it's still a preview, but we just went live with an app, and we had several uses of the polymorphic fields, and they would work fine and then just stop working. and I don't know if there were updates being made to the functions or whatnot. But we went back to the old way of doing it. But hopefully when that come October, whenever that'll be fully baked.
Okay. Now that sounds good. Now October timeframe. Shawn, I've been on a project where we could have used, a nice calendar. Someone asked, "Oh, do we have calendar control?" I said, "Hey, Unified Resource Scheduling has got this board," and said, "Oh, don't we have to bring field service? And what's new in field service? And when it's going to be separated from co-joint twin URS."
There hasn't been really a defined statement from the product teams on when that decoupling will happen. I know that's a desired end goal at some point, but right now you still have to have at least one license of field service or project service to get it installed, and then you could remove field service or project service.
You can actually physically remove the project.
Yeah,
the solutions. Sorry.
Right, because remember, you can enable any entity to be schedulable.
That's
so
right.
as of right now, as long as you're an app user, sales app, customer service app, that kind of thing, my understanding is you can have URS, but you have to use field service or project service to get it installed because it's coupled with those installs. Dependent on your environment and what you have existing, you're going to want to look at which one of those to use that would be the less intrusive of the two. I know field service updates a lot of different objects when you install it, and provided you don't change anything in between the installation of, or the setup of unified resource scheduling, you should be able to remove field service without a problem, and URS would remain. But now for scheduling purposes, the schedule board I have found doesn't really work well for like a group calendar or something like that unless you're scheduling everything within URS. So if you're doing some things with standard appointments, unless you make that appointment a schedulable object, the schedule board will have significant gaps when the users look at it. So
I'm sure by now Andre would have built a PCF calendar, right?
Well, yeah, probably.
So why don't you just use the calendar visualization, which we blogged about on CRM Tip of the Day?
Control.
No. There's a visual control that's been around since 8.1 with the mobile that now works in unified interface, where you can make any view a calendar, and you can associate what the dates are. So you have the start and stop time. It's something that, for example, Click Dimensions is leveraging it now for the campaign calendar. So if you just want a calendar showing different people on the calendar, you have it.
Yeah, that's an option, but I guess it just goes down to what the requirements are from the customer. So that's definitely an option.
Look, it boils down to, when the most annoying part of using something like that is that you show it and customers say, "Oh, that's great, let's use it." Then you go down the track and you find very quickly that control does 80% of the job. With a bit of effort, you can get to 90. But then turns out that you can't really do the remaining 10% with like do or die. You say it's impossible, right? We have to rewrite the whole thing. And then customer is angry at you because they didn't provide the requirements up front. They were not clear up front what they want. They said, "Oh, that solves all our problems." Well, it turns out it solves 90% of their problems, right? But by the time you get to this 90, it's too late.
Show it to them and tell them the limits of it and show them how it works. And they decide to go that road, and they change their mind. Then there's this thing called a change order. And then you estimate to do it a different way. You get them to pay you more money. Then you do it a different way. It was their decision. It wasn't your decision.
Yeah. I suppose.
They own it. They bought it. They own it.
Yeah. But right. you hear me. Yeah. It's a challenge with anything built in.
It might stink, so we don't want to do it. All right. So I have some questions that people have sent on LinkedIn and other ways. And one of the channels that we participate, or most of us participate in, there's a channel called Ask Joel, which is kind of like the last resort. We can't find an answer anywhere, so let's Ask Joel. So I thought we'd do a podcast version of Ask Joel. So, but it's not just Ask Me. I'm going to get your guys' take on these questions, and then I'll tell you how I would answer. Okay, so one is a customer service deployment, and sometimes they get voicemails. Like somebody says, I want to buy your product. My number is blah, 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 blah. So then the person in the call center calls back, but they don't get anybody. They get the voicemail. So they'll leave a message to be good customer service, and they need to log that call happened. The reason they need to log it is so that they would get a call back. They know what they talked about, but also for activity tracking purposes. So the case requires you to put a name in there, but we don't have the name of the person. So what would you do?
And the case is like contact is mandatory field, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I would put the phone number in there.
Well, I mean, so
and then change it when it becomes available. But the phone number is guaranteed to be unique.
See,
and it
now,
becomes
I did post this in said channel, and George may have read the answer there. So
I haven't. I swear. No,
well,
I would use the phone number.
That was the Sarah Jelinek response. Anything I do with customer service, Sarah's the final word. So
yep.
Yes, and that is a great suggestion because it's unique. They were putting NA in there, so but it is unique so that when they call back and the phone system answers, it pops it up. You see the number. You say, "Oh, sir, what's your name?" And you may replace it with the name.
Nice.
Okay. Next question. CCPA. This is kind of the next word in privacy laws. We all remember the big brouhaha over the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. This is actually in the United States. It's the state of California's privacy law that takes effect next year. I'm sorry. And it has a lot of similar provisions as GDPR. Like if somebody wants to know what data you have about them, you have to provide it. If somebody wants you to forget about them, you got to wipe them out.
Hold on. Is it for the customers in California or for the businesses in California?
It's anybody who does business in California. So anybody who's an online realtor. What am I trying to say? Retailer needs to be it because they have customers in California. It would apply to them. So,
and it will, my knowledge of US, it will be like what, about 70 years before it comes to Texas, something similar.
Well, but if you're a company in Texas, you have customers in California, so you have to get ready for it. Now the fines are much lower. It's like $2,500 to $7,500. So nothing like the big chunk of money that GDPR is, but still something that people are concerned about. So what are the things?
2,500 people who do business cross states concerned about. I would say, look, guys, put 2,500 in a kitty and forget about it.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's like it's not even a slap on the wrist. It's like more of a flick. I'd say, look, don't bother.
What I said, kind of like GDPR, best thing you can do is clean up your data so you know who's there. If you don't 10 records for the same person, and that's where Data 8 Provence and other things like that are a big help to do that. All right, you want the next question? I'll let you answer this one. This one came in via LinkedIn, and somebody asked, actually listening to one of our old episodes, or maybe reading a tip of the day, but one of the things we put out in the past. I love it when I get questions, and it's like a 3-year-old thing, and it's totally out of date. But this was, hearing, hey, if you're online, you can at any time ask for a copy of your database and install it on premise. What would you say to that? Can you still do that, Shawn?
Well, you could do data export service, and you could also use Azure SQL. So there's ways to get it, but it's not a request to copy kind of thing. It's more you have to do the You have to
Oh,
do
you
it
can
first.
actually request. You can request a copy. You will get a copy, except that it's unusable.
Right.
Yeah, because
So when you're wanting
online's
to
9.2 and on premise is 9.1. You couldn't take that and do anything with it other than T-SQL queries.
Well, I guess when I was saying what I was thinking when I thought on-prem, I'm just thinking that the data would be in a on-prem server, not necessarily using the on-prem tool. So I guess it depends on what applications you're using within Dynamics 365 as to whether or not you could successfully use the data that's in that off that copy or that data export in an on-premise application. Like for example, if you're using field service, you couldn't do it at all. Uh, I don't think there is a PSA on-prem. So
No, but it's not about having the same solution on-prem. It's about whether you can get your data as a SQL database. And I don't think, like, how imagine it could happen because, okay, that would give you a backup, but backup would be encrypted. That would be encrypted with their keys. They wouldn't give you their keys. So how does that work? Until they bring customer managed encryption keys to online, there's no chance on earth you can get a copy of your backup.
They have customer managed encryption keys now. It might be
mhm.
only for
Uh,
enterprise customers,
Yep.
but they do have it.
okay, so
But I don't know anybody who's actually used it because people realize, hey, this is convenient, but oh crap,
you
if I
lose the
lose this
keys.
key, I
Yeah.
can't get in my system and nobody can help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? Data integration, data export service to SQL. I have I have a couple installations that use that. Our primary purpose was actually a large number of SSRS reports that they didn't want to rewrite at all, or wasn't possible or feasible to rewrite. So we introduced data export service, and I have to say that for all installations I've done, they're not complex, but they have reasonable. They have quite reasonable volume, right? Um, and been running like for about 6, 7 months, not a single error, like none. And the volume of transactions is reasonable. Like we're talking about 10, 20,000 a day.
Hmm.
So not a single, like not a blip. And I go in from time to time, just out of curiosity, not a single one. Just works like a clockwork. Just boom, 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 done. Maybe because the systems are kind of we specifically stayed away from things like a lot of plugins. We stayed away from a lot of custom code or a huge number of workflows and things like that. So we deliberately kept it a bit simple. So we
Yeah,
have
if
number
you
of
only have
workflows.
if you have 50 accounts and nobody can write any data to it, it'll be really simple.
Yeah, but as I said, volume is there. We just keep things reasonably simple, and we don't overcomplicate unnecessarily with the plugins and things like that. So we figured out sometimes it's better to to get user to compromise on some functionality rather than write a very complex plugin because
Right.
then someone needs to own that. It becomes a technical debt. So. But I'm saying, yeah, DES, it does work. It's quite reliable, and it does create your own copy of the data day in, day out. It's
So here's a
continuous.
question. This is the next question. This is kind of a weird one. Somebody was setting up different CDS environments, getting into Power Apps, and wanted to know, would it be possible for me to have multiple CDS environments using the data export service to bring data to the same database? Different table sets and stuff, but bring it to the same database.
Hmm. So they want to set up different CDS databases, configure data export service for each database, and have the data going into like, so let's say 3 CDS databases into a
Yeah,
single?
I think the point was they had disconnected processes, but ultimately wanted to have some roll-up reporting between all of them. So they weren't going to be the same CDS environment with the new world where you have a bunch of.
Couple things. Well, first of all, is do they want to merge the data, or do they want to keep
they're
them
different
separate?
types of tables. They're not like all using the contact table. One of them has a exception entity and some other stuff. I guess users would be common, but other than that, they're expert type solutions.
I have no idea. I'm stumped. I don't think you can. Basically,
I told them my theory, not trying this, is that you likely can have them go to the same environment as separate databases, and then if you want to join them, then use cross table joins.
Because you could configure each database to have different tables to be exported via the data export service. That I know you can do, but once you get that. We're exporting the data into Azure SQL, and then from there you would have to do something to pull that data into a common database. But now is the question, I want it usable within Dynamics?
No. I just want to be able to report on it. You do Power BI. I think they want to do some Power BI, and they just didn't want to have to work with separate databases.
Well, okay. Well, once you do the exports, wouldn't you? And again, I'm not real good on integration, so if my answer sounds totally stupid, then forgive it. But then wouldn't you just have to create the table structure in SQL to be able to pull that data from the data export in Azure SQL into the on-prem SQL or whatever reporting database you want to bring it into, as long as the data structure is the same.
That's in line with what I told.
Yeah, well, there you go.
All right. So Shawn, what are you going to be submitting to the Power Platform 24?
So I'm actually working on a Power App with my wife, who is a kindergarten teacher, and it is a Power App that helps kindergarten and first grade students learn phonemic awareness. So phonics, essentially. The concept is a Canvas app with AI Builder that is trained to recognize a list of sight words. And then when you hover over the sight word, it recognizes the word and plays a MP3 or a WAV file to speak the word to the student. So it's something I'm working on. Haven't got it to work yet, but working on it. So hopefully I'll be submitting that, so we can talk through the process.
Are the 5-year-olds going to be guest users on your network?
So since this is for my wife, she would be logging in as herself, and then the concept is that we would have the roster in a Excel database. And then you'd be able to select the child who is using the app. So you'll be logged in as someone on the network, part of the instance, and then from there the child can be selected so that we can track the progress based on that child, and then ideally the results of their experience, whether they get it right or wrong, understand it. There'll be some kind of action after the recognition to have them identified on their own or type it in correctly, so that they can copy the spelling so they can learn how to spell the sight word. And then that would be pushed back to that Excel spreadsheet to keep metrics. So that's kind of the concept I'm working on. So hopefully I'll be able to get far enough along to be able to submit for that, and then walk through the process and hopefully get it in front of the kids so that they could actually use it and get some responses.
Nice. So you got 10 days basically to get your submission in.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know. And you know me, at 9.5 days, I will be furiously or feverishly trying to submit that entrance as I often do.
Ooh, you the guy who texted me, I have an idea an hour before the deadline for Ignite submissions.
But then it got extended, so I was actually ahead of time. See how that works?
Yeah, skin of your teeth.
That's right. That's right. The one more thing I wanted to say is just make sure everybody knew about the extension for At Your Service is our new YouTube channel that we're going to start not only doing the At Your Service podcast on the YouTube channel as well, but we're also starting a new weekly video series called the Weekly Dispatch that will also be released in audio format. So if you're not a YouTube person, you'll still get the content. And our first episode is going out this week, and it'll be based on the product catalog. Now, I know a lot of people have talked about the product catalog before, but we're taking a little bit of it. I know we're taking a little bit of a different take. We're using some, rather than just the standard here, let me do a screen share of what the product catalog is and creating a product and that sort of thing. What I'm trying to do is make it a little more interactive, give some more real world examples, and make it a little bit, try to make it fun a little bit. And then in the end, the intent is to tie it into how the product catalog interacts with customer service, field service, and project service automation. We'll be bringing in some of our co-hosts from At Your Service, like Sarah Jelinek and Antti Pajunen, to talk about PSA and customer service, and it should be fun. So hopefully follow us. If everything works out, my video editing skills are being tested. We'll release our first weekly dispatch this week.
Sweet. We'll look forward to that. So, product catalog is not the sexiest topic, but it is an important topic. So,
Exactly.
And it's something that, again, I've used. I don't consider myself to be a product catalog expert, so I'll watch and learn. If you're doing a video, are you showing it during your video?
So the concept is we're doing both. We're going to talk about it, and while I'm talking about it, I'm going to be using practical examples on the video. So, for example, I will have things on the video to represent unit groups, units, product characteristics, product categories, things go into a little more explanation in a practical nature of what these things are, so that people can understand what they mean when they see it on the form. And then we will go into the actual application and walk through, like, for example, when you install field service, there's some new areas within the product record that you need to be aware of. And there's some different things in pricing that matter for sales, but maybe not for customer service or field service, for example. So yeah, it'll be a mix. It's a little bit ambitious, and hopefully I pull it off. But it's not going to be just a straight let me share my screen and drone on for 20 minutes at a time.
Okay,
that's the plan.
I look forward to that. So that's going to be every week.
It's in the name, the Weekly Dispatch. So, and then after we get done with,
but I've got a daily brief, and I don't do it every day.
Well, that's true. But yeah, the intent is it'll be once a week, and roughly 20 minutes at a clip. And it's the goal. It's always been the goal of At Your Service to have a product feature kind of section of the podcast, and we never really got there. We tried a number of times, but it never really got there. So this is kind of that way to get to that point. And then once we wrap up with product catalog, we'll move on to something else within the platform.
Nice.
Yeah. Should be fun.
Look forward to that.
Should be fun.
Okay. Well, for George, I'll say goodbye. And let's see. We should have a podcast coming up. That will be good to help us be productive.
There you go.
I have daily briefs coming up. Lots of good stuff.
Very active on the CRM Audio Network.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Shawn, good day.
Farewell. See ya.